The last day of death row. Inmate Amber McLaughlin, first transgender execution in U.S. history. Hello, friends. Tonight, we bring you a case that made history in America's death penalty system. In 2003, the quiet streets of St. Louis were shaken when Beverly Gunther vanished without a trace. She was a kind-hearted woman, a sister and friend, who had rebuilt her life after hardship until one night when her world was stolen away. What investigators uncovered would lead them to someone she once trusted, Scott McLaughlin, who would later live as Amber McLaughlin. Nearly 2 decades later, Amber's execution would become a first in United States history, sparking national debate and leaving behind haunting questions about justice, identity, and accountability. But behind every headline is a victim who mattered deeply. And tonight we remember Beverly as much as we examine Amber's final chapter. Stay with us until the end of this story. And don't forget to subscribe to Death Watch Diaries for more powerful prison documentary stories. Amber McLaughlin was born Scott Andrew McLaughlin on January 13, 1973. Childhood was far from easy. Reports later revealed years of instability, abuse, and trauma that scarred her long before the events that placed her name in headlines. By her late teens, those scars manifested in alarming ways. In 1992, she faced serious charges involving a teenage girl, resulting in prison time and registration as a sex offender. These early brushes with the law set a troubling pattern. While rehabilitation was discussed, the deep issues of anger, control, and untreated mental health remained. Like so many stories that begin with hardship, the darkness grew until it consumed both the perpetrator and the innocent lives touched along the way. But before delving deeper into Amber's actions, we must remember Beverly. Born and raised in Missouri, Beverly Gunther was described as dependable, hardworking, and kind. She worked at a local company in St. Louis and had just begun to find her footing again after a difficult divorce. Family and friends called her the glue who held everyone together. By the early 2000s, Beverly was living in her own home, enjoying independence, and making new plans for the future. Those who knew her described a woman who was cautious but optimistic, someone who was regaining her strength. Sadly, crossing paths with Scott McLaughlin changed everything. At first, Beverly and Scott's relationship seemed normal enough. He was charming at times, capable of being attentive, and for Beverly, who was rebuilding her life after heartbreak, the companionship seemed like a fresh start. But the relationship quickly shifted. Controlling behavior emerged. Beverly confided in co-workers and family that she felt watched, followed, and intimidated. She took legal steps by filing restraining orders. But as we often see, a piece of paper is not always enough to keep danger at bay. In the weeks before her disappearance, Beverly expressed fear. She told her brother and close friends that she believed Scott was stalking her. She was strong and outspoken, but even strength cannot shield someone when the threat is relentless. That November night was bitterly cold in St. Louis. Beverly left work, but never made it home. Hours later, her car was discovered abandoned near her workplace. Her keys and coat were inside, but Beverly was gone. Alarm bells immediately rang for her family. Beverly was reliable. She would not disappear without telling someone. The search was urgent. Flyers went up, co-workers gave statements, and the trail led investigators to a familiar name, Scott McLaughlin. Witnesses had seen him near the area that evening. Tracking dogs picked up his scent. Security footage aligned with suspicions. Days later, the heartbreaking truth emerged. Beverly's body was found near the banks of the Mississippi River, hidden in brush. She had been brutally attacked. For her loved ones, the confirmation was devastating. Their fears had become reality. Scott McLaughlin was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The evidence was damning witness accounts, physical proof, and a history of harassment against Beverly. The trial began in 2006, and the jury had little trouble convicting him. But sentencing took a controversial turn. The jurors could not agree unanimously on whether McLaughlin should face life imprisonment or death. In most states, this would mean an automatic life sentence. But Missouri is one of only 2 states that allow a judge to override the jury. And in this case, the judge sentenced Scott McLaughlin to death. It was a decision that would fuel debate for years. Should one judge hold the power to decide life or death when jurors are divided? The ruling sealed McLaughlin's fate and placed the case in legal limbo for nearly 2 decades. While on death row, Scott began a deeply personal transformation. living as Amber. She identified as a transgender woman. Those close to her said the change was authentic, not a ploy for sympathy or legal advantage. She began using the name Amber and lived openly as a woman in prison. For the public, this added complexity. The case was no longer just about the violent end of Beverly's life. It now touched issues of gender identity, justice, and equality. Supporters argued Amber's identity should not overshadow her crime, while others viewed her execution as historically significant, the first of its kind in the United States. Amber also turned to faith during her years behind bars. She read the Bible regularly, wrote journals, and corresponded with people outside the prison walls. But none of this erased the weight of the crime or the grief of Beverly's family. Over the years, Amber's attorneys fought tirelessly. They argued that her childhood trauma, mental health struggles, and neurological conditions had never been fully considered. They also claimed that Missouri's system, allowing a judge to impose death after a jury deadlock, was deeply flawed. But appeals failed one after another. In August 2021, the Eighth Circuit Court reinstated the death sentence, clearing the way for Missouri to set an execution date. As January 3, 2023 approached, petitions for clemency poured in from activists, religious leaders, and supporters of LGBTQ+ rights. They urged Missouri's governor to grant mercy, not because Amber was innocent, but because of her transformation and the unresolved questions about her trial. Yet the governor refused to intervene. On January 3, 2023, Amber McLaughlin was led into the execution chamber at the Eastern Reception, Diagnostic and Correctional Center in Bonne Terre, Missouri, at 49 years old. She had spent almost half her life behind bars. Witnesses reported that she appeared calm. When asked for final words, she gave a quiet apology. "I am sorry for what I did. I am a loving and caring person." The lethal injection began at 30 minutes past 6 in the evening. Within minutes, Amber was pronounced dead. Among those present were Beverly's brother and sister-in-law. They did not come for closure. They came to honor Beverly's memory. Beverly's sister-in-law later said, "I teared up a little bit because I was thinking about Bev. I'm not crying over Scott." For them, this day was not about history books or headlines. It was about Beverly, the woman who never got to say goodbye. Dear friends, cases like this remind us that justice is not simple. It is layered with grief, controversy, and questions that may never be fully answered. If you found this story thought-provoking, please subscribe to Death Watch Diaries for more prison documentary stories. Together, we remember the victims, reflect on justice, and honor the lives lost.